We'll be back with regular episodes of DC Daily tomorrow. But in the meantime, we've got another treat from Comic-Con. This is the DC Batman panel, moderated by our very own Tiffany Smith, with an all-star lineup of Batman writers and artists digging into the world of The Dark Knight. Check it out.
I am so pumped to be here. I was like, am I supposed to go up? I'm just going up now because this is happening, because I'm so excited about celebrating Batman's 80th. Are you guys pumped? Yeah? I see a lot of Bat emblem shirts in here, so you guys know what this panel is all about. We've got some awesome writers and artists that are coming up here to talk about their experiences working with Batman or Batgirl, or what the impact of Batman has been on their life. So right now, let's give a warm welcome to all of our panelists. I'm gonna call you guys up one at a time. First up, Tom King, who's just like beaming on the side of the stage. Then we've got Mitch Gerads, come on up here.
Come on, buddy.
He was not beaming on the side. He's like, am I supposed to come up now? Yeah, yeah. All right, next up, we've got Cecil Castellucci. Come on up here, lady. Okay. Next, welcome to the stage, Brad Walker. Come on up here. And we've got Mr. Pete Tomasi. And next up, please welcome to the stage, Scott Snyder. Greg Capullo is on his way, but I think he's like having a little trouble getting his bat cowl on, so he'll be here in just a little bit. Give our panelists a huge welcome, you guys. So this Comic-Con being Batman's 80th, there is so much celebration going on, from signings to awesome installations at the booth. There's also great activations. So has anybody been been to any of the activations or the Bat Museum stuff? The Comic-Con Museum? Over there? You're like, me. Anybody else? You were so polite. You're like, me. Did you love it? Yeah. Did any of you guys make it to the museum? What was that experience like?
No, it was super cool. It's so weird to see a museum dedicated to Batman. I mean, it'll switch out, but there's a Bat Cave downstairs and all the Batman black and white statues in order, and it's fun to go through and see if you can be the nerd who can name all the Batman statues and who drew them without looking at the key. I'm told even Jim Lee couldn't do it, so.
Whoa, it's the ultimate challenge.
I know, right?
Well, it's like, who had the key and who was being quizzed? And what was at stake? Like, what did you win?
Just bragging rights.
It really should be the opposite of bragging.
Yeah.
If you're that nerdy.
Yeah.
I mean, it is definitely worth bragging rights at Comic-Con, for sure, right, guys?
Yeah.
It's the only place.
Yeah. What was your guys' experience like? Anybody else who made it to the museum? Anybody else make it over there yet?
I have not.
Not yet. So what I love about this too is that Comic-Con obviously is just so much about celebrating the characters that we love so much. And I think for everybody on this panel, myself included, Batman has had such a big impact, and everyone has that iconic moment that is their Batman that really established the character for them. And I want to hear from each of you guys what that moment is. It could be in any medium, but I'll start off with mine to give you guys a second to think about it. I don't want to put you on the spot too fast. So for me, it was for sure Batman the Animated Series. I grew up, my dad read comic books and kind of started me off with the animated series cartoons to kind of get into the comic book world. And I remember him just being like, well, if you like watching this, you could read them every single week. So that was kind of the start for me of Batman having a huge impact in my life, and still to this day, obviously, getting to work with DC Daily and DC All Access and chat with these lovely folks. What about for you, Tom?
I think it's kind of fucked up. I'm sorry, but it's I think my parents for some stupid reason bought me Dark Knight Returns when I was so young. I must have been like 8 years old, and they're like, "Here, you'll enjoy this. It's about death and murder," and I loved it because it was about death and murder. And that comic changed me, and I was like, this is Dark Knight Returns to me is still the best Batman story of all time, so I started at the top. And yeah, just that character who sort of never stops. He'll never quit. He'll always keep coming. There's nothing that will stop Batman from finding justice. I stuck to that for the rest of my life. Love it.
I had two older brothers who were super into comics, so I'm sure that was my first introduction to Batman. But personally, the very first introduction to Batman I can remember is, some of you may remember it, or some of you may know of it. At Burger King, they had these like superpowers superhero cups that they like locked onto this little white cup, but it was like a figure that was the handle, and I had a Batman and a Darkseid, and the Darkseid scared me to death. I did not like it.
But you still kept it.
Yeah.
For me, it was Adam West, the Batman series. I loved him so much that I invited him to my 4th birthday party. Batman, not Adam West. And
Did he show?
How did you invite
let me tell you
Okay.
the story. So I wrote Batman. My invitation. I had my mom write Batman, the Batcave, and I put it in the mailbox. And my mom said, well, I think he's very busy. I don't think he's going to come to your birthday party. I said, oh, no, Batman loves me. And he will show up to my birthday party. So my mom sewed my dad a Batman costume. And my dad, she said, don't speak, just show up. And he gave me Batman, obviously, not my dad. Batman gave me these omnibuses of the golden age and silver age of Batman stories. So this was before I could read, and I just would look at those stories all the time. I mean, eventually I figured out that it was my dad and not Batman. But my dad was like, well, Batman was very busy, and so he lent me one of his costumes so I could be here. I was like, oh yeah, well, he's solving crimes. So so that was my first, so Adam West is my first Batman. But it brought me directly into comics even before I could read, and so I think that was the seed of my love for comics.
I love it. I wrote a letter to John Bon Jovi inviting him to my birthday and telling him that I thought we would get married one day. And my dad did not dress up as John Bon Jovi, so you have better parents than I do.
That's practically the exact same story.
Right? Was it John Bon Jovi or Batman, though?
On Batman.
On Batman, yeah.
I've thought about this topic a lot recently, just having started on Detective, and I thought sort of about my connection to Batman personally, and I started reading, Batman was the first stuff that I read, and I started reading comics in the late 80s, and right after that was the animated series. It was like, dominoes falling of the books blew up around Death in the Family, and then the 89 movie came out, and then the sequels and cartoons, and it was like one thing after another, and I feel like you couldn't really escape Batman as a cultural pounding on your senses as a kid at that age, and I was so immersed in Batman, and it was such a huge thing for me for years and years as a kid, and so then starting on the book recently, I sort of thought about that so much and answered that question in interviews before, and tried to sort of tap the same immersion in Batman to do the book, and it was a helpful tool actually. So yeah, I've thought about that a lot lately.
Nice. All right. I was gonna try and do a surprise. He was sneaking up here, but our final panelist, Craig Capullo. How you doing, sir? I feel like I had to call you out. It's like the kid showing up late to school, and you're like, yes, you are late, sir, but you're here. We're just chatting about our...
Just role exchanging here.
It's true. We're just making our way down the line talking about the moment that really defined Batman for each of us growing up.
Oh, gotcha.
Go ahead, Pete. What was yours?
Yeah, I think it was the show with Adam West, also the reruns that put the hook in me, and then of course Halloween costumes galore and running around as Batman for many moons, and then the Jim Aparo era in terms of the art was the stuff that I connected to, the Brave and the Bold in the '70s and things like that, and just that energy that he brought to the character, and also there was a realism, and there's this and this cartoonist mix with his stuff that was brilliant, and of course just then everything else leading after that, which is always a good thing about Batman, because there always seemed to be another person who took the baton and would just keep pushing it and doing some more great interesting things with it. But in the comic stuff, it was the Jim Aparo years.
I think for me, the thing that was so amazing was that there was always a Batman for the era I was going through. I grew up in New York City in the '80s, so Dark Knight Returns and Year One made Batman immediate and urgent and real to me. And then when I was in college, the animated series kept me involved, and then Grant stuff really brought me back after that. So the adaptability of Batman was always the thing that sort of made him so special. There was always this kind of drawback, because at core, he's about a guy who has suffered this tragedy, this thing that happened to him that makes anyone feel like there's no sense to the world. Somebody comes and kills your parents over nothing. And yet he turns his life into this engine of meaning. And that core thing is so easily, I think, translatable to multiple kinds of things, whether it's like cartoony silliness, or the 60s, Adam West stuff, or any of
serious
it.
stuff. I have to take objection. The TV show was very serious.
It was serious to me, too. The best con I ever had was here. It was like 5 years ago I met Adam West. Dan DiDio, I remember, was like, I was still on Batman, and he was like, do you want to meet Adam West? And I was like, absolutely, there's nobody I want to meet more. And they brought me into this room, and he was standing there with his back to me, and he turned around, and he had this cravat and this yellow sunglasses. And he didn't know who I was, obviously. Like, they were like, oh, Mr. West, this is Scott. He's writing Batman. And he turned around and he goes, Scott, now it's a party.
Oh my
And that was like, I could retire and die. And that was it. And
Scott, that is amazing. I can't even believe that. My 4-year-old heart is pitter-pattering.
It was great.
Where was Instagram when that happened? I expect to see it somewhere posted so we could all enjoy it. What was the moment for you, Greg?
As far as my introduction or to Batman as a character, what was the
your introduction or like an iconic moment that really defines him for you.
Oh, I think the introduction was, at the same time, my older cousin had given me my first Batman comics, which I think was Aparo. It was the artist, and then I was introed into the TV show and whatnot. But the part that really gave me the thrill is the same answer, basically, Scott, which is Dark Knight Returns. And in fact, I think it's such a perfect book that a lot of my friends, I know it's hard to believe, have never read comic books, and yet they're my friend still. I don't know how, but so I would force them to read the book. And I couldn't just give it to them and let them borrow it and just hand it back. I would quiz them to make sure that they actually read the book. And so to me, that's a masterpiece. And the great thing about that book for me is the older you get, the more relatable it becomes. Like when Batman goes, oh, now he shows me what a fast kick is. Because, you start to lose your sharp edge as the years go. So it's a book.
I fast kicked Greg on the way in here.
So it's a book that just keeps on giving and delivering, no matter how long you hold on to it. So that's the one that really, it just still wows me and thrills me. As a matter of fact, I loved the scene so intensely where Batman had wired himself up to the lamppost to combat Superman, and he had that flat bullnose helmet. I just thought that was so cool. You could see it in my last Batman costume. I made the nose flat because I just wanted to pay homage to that because it turned me on so much. I think it looked cool and badass. So anyway, Dark Knight Returns.
I kind of want to go back to, because we were talking, you meant everybody kind of has a moment from the Batman TV show, and Greg, you're saying it was serious. It was serious for you. Was there an episode or a moment for each of you guys on that show that really, really stood out? Like, what was the moment for you, Cecil, that you were like, he better come to my birthday?
Oh,
Well,
I'd like to go first on this one. All right, so Batman and Robin, they come upon some alphabet soup, right? And they're like, Robin's like, gosh, Batman, what does it mean? Notice, Robin, that certain letters are missing from the alphabet. And so he goes just, and this is, and as a kid, I'm hanging on, I think this is serious. He goes, lucky for me, I have my Bat alphabet soup container with me. And he pulls out from behind his cape the thermos, and he collects the soup, and then they bring it back to the Batcave, and he actually has a Bat alphabet soup decoder thing, whatever, and he dumps the soup into it, and out on a conveyor belt reads the message that was hidden in the alphabet soup. Now, that's awesome.
That's an Eisner story.
I just have to say that really supports your Batman. It was serious. He had a soup decoder that he needed.
He was a very kind Batman too, you know, like he had a lot of heart, you know, and I think what I liked was this sort of the secret identity that he had, you know, that he was one way, but then there were like the angles of the show, you know, and like the kapow and like all that. But I'm just going to give a little shout out to the ladies, you know, because he had a formidable opponent in Catwoman, both Julie Newmar and Eartha Kitt. But also, I'm going to give a little shout out to my Batgirl, Yvonne Craig, who really like, you know, I think the whole sort of the whole sort of vibe of it made it very serious and very lighthearted, where you, as a young person, you could get sophisticated ideas like about art museums and the library and like, you know, just, I don't know, society, whatever that means. Yeah, alphabet soup. You know, so yeah. You know, he just seemed like a good guy. Probably now I'd be like, he seemed like he'd be a good guy to have a beer with. And when I was 4, he was like, he should be at my birthday party and have some cake.
Well, and I think those characters are so iconic. I mean, you talk about Eartha Kitt, Catwoman, where it's like the voice is just so ingrained in my head. I remember I had a voiceover audition at one point, and I listened to so much of it. I'd watched, you know, with my family growing up, but then just listening to just the voice, you're like, it's so incredible when you think about that those voices of those characters are how you hear them for so long, if that's the show you grew up on. Were there any other iconic episodes for anybody else?
I specifically remember this being a young man of 7 or 8, or maybe 13, but I'm not gonna tell it. And I was at my grandparents' house, and we're watching the afternoon reruns, but I didn't know they were reruns. And it's a King Tut episode, and Batman is trapped in an iron mummy, and it's closing in on him, and it cuts away, and like find out next time. And I remember as a kid being like, wow, I just watched the last Batman episode. Like, he's not gonna get out of that thing. And I remember like my mom coming home, like, Mom, you know what I saw today? The last episode of Batman. It was he died. And then you watch 72. I was like, oh, that's what a cliffhanger is. So you slowly learn to write that way.
And you're like, that's why I decided I wanted to write Batman.
That's right. So that's, when you write Batman, you're like, if I can get someone to that point I was when I was 8 years old, like, wow, did Tom just write the last Batman story?
I don't know. You heard it here first.
Oh, yeah.
The other cool thing I think is, we all mentioned different shows and different moments and things. Like, I watched the Batman TV show with my parents, and then the animated series, I watched it as a kid. I have the whole DVD set now. I've rewatched it again. What's the experience like for you guys rewatching things with kids or friends or siblings at different ages? Anybody?
I mean, like I was saying earlier, how I immersed myself when I started the job. I love doing that, and I put those. They had just put, Pete and I talked about right when I was starting. They put the animated series back out on Blu-ray, and we both had gotten it. And I watched them as I was going to bed every night, and I just like kept myself. It probably could be considered unhealthy how much I kept myself in like a Batman frame of mind.
You're leaving out the stalactites you put on your bedroom wall.
I carved my entire apartment in styrofoam, spray painted it. That would work for a Star Trek book too. But I would put on the Danny Elfman score while I would work, and you talked about hearing the Adam West voice in your head. I somewhat purposefully probably trained myself. I hear the Kevin Conroy voice, but not just him. I hear who was it? Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. Who did Alfred, and I hear the Robin voice, which is probably making him sound a little younger than Dick Grayson should sound now. But the animated series was huge to me, and I was like so into the books at the time, and yeah, I think you can use those childhood loves of all the different media, and even there's probably things that we all take out of the 60s show, even though the tone is completely different of anything that you do now. But
I showed my youngest stepson to the 66 TV show because I had to buy the Blu-ray. I had to. It's just like the law. So
if you haven't bought it, it looks great.
And he's kind of older, right? So I go, he's going to see how corny it is right out of the gate, and everything has a name tag on it. Everything has a name tag on it. And he was like eye rolling over the whole thing going, that's so corny. I go, that's the point. And once he got adapted to that, then he loved it. Then it became, oh my God, can you believe that sign? So, but he got into the show as corny as it was. So, I think it's timeless. As long as you understand it, it's campy. You can enjoy the ride. I don't care how old you are. Listen, I still love it. I'll watch the reruns over and over and over.
I have a really embarrassing story about watching the animated series.
You are in a safe space.
Yeah.
Please share.
There was a two-part episode of kind of the origin of Robin, and it was aired primetime when it originally aired. And my parents were watching whatever they were watching downstairs, and they're like, go watch it upstairs. So I went upstairs to our little TV, and I was sitting on this chair in front of the TV, and I literally at one point leaned in to see the TV and get so excited that I fell off, hit my head on the thing holding the TV, and had to go to the emergency room. I had split my head wide open. So that's how much I was into it.
Did you ever figure out what happened to Robin's parents?
I'm sure they're fine.
I just wanted to sort of add that one of the things that I think is really great about rewatching or rereading any Batman story, or any story in general, but any Batman story is that as you get older with more experience, it becomes enhanced and enriched in new ways. And I think the joy of seeing that, like if I see with my niece or something like that, is that they're seeing it for the first time, so I get to see it again. Or if they talk to me about a book, I get to hear about it again through the eyes of someone who's enjoying it for the first time. So I kind of had this dual vision of of enjoying Batman in the way that I did when I was a child, but also in the more mature way that I enjoy him now.
I think that's with the TV shows or the comics even. You read it and you look at it at different points in your life and different things stand out to you. And that's what I love so much about comics and the genre itself, because you read it, sometimes you're maybe more visualizing things along the lines of Batman, sometimes you're visualizing things a little more along the lines of Robin.
Or you see what the artist and the writer were trying to do, and how they were trying to deepen the story, and you had an experience, you were inexperienced when you were 8, but then when you're 14 and you're reading Dark Knight, or 17, you're like, oh yeah, I get it. And then you read it when you're 30 and you're like, whoa, it changes. It's cool.
Except for Tom, who's reading the adult Batman at a very young age. And I just want to I feel like for a lot of people, and especially you guys can jump in on this as well, that the idea of Batman, for some people, it's always Batman and Robin. You want to have that story. It's a story about the two of them together. And for some people, it's just Batman stories. And everyone out here, I'm sure you have your favorite. Can I just hear a little cheer for people who their Robin is Damian?
Woo!
Dick Grayson fans?
Yeah, come on.
I love it. So you can just jump in on that. What's the experience like, or what is it that makes a story feel like it needs to be a Batman and Robin story versus just Batman sometimes?
I think Robin is Batman's sort of greatest accomplishment, right? Or especially Dick Grayson. The thing about Dick that makes him amazing to me is that he has the exact same origin as Batman, right? His parents died; they were killed by a criminal.
His parents died?
You really got to watch that episode.
You hit your head, remember?
I gotta finish that episode.
But he grows up to not become the darkness that Batman is, to not be haunted by that. He sees the light in people. He sees the best in people. He's the ultimate optimist of the DC universe. He sees a better world coming. And why is that? Why is he different than Batman? And I think the difference is that Dick had Bruce in his life, and that Bruce was able to share that pain with him and help him and guide it through it. And to me, it's sort of a tale of what the attention of a good father or a good a friend can do to you. If they can share something with you, share their pain with you, and help you. Batman's greatest accomplishment was making someone who wasn't Batman. Yeah, that's why I love Dick Grayson. I started with Agent 37. There's 37s throughout my whole book because I just love that character.
I would totally agree with that. I think Tom hit it right on the head.
Yeah. I was like, woo! Scott. I was like, wait, there's more. I'm like, what? Dig into that one. He's like, okay.
No, he said it better than I could. I agree 100%. I think that, sometimes Batman doesn't realize he's training the next generation to be better than he is, but, in those rare moments when he sees it and has any kind of self-awareness, that's the gift, is that he knows that the people that come up under him that are his family are going to be better than he can be. So, yeah. Tom said it better.
And the great thing about Batman and Batman and Robin is you can write their stories for both of them. I mean, I've written both, and it's a lot of fun to write it with Robin and add that extra dynamic of that youthfulness and Damian's obviously a challenged upbringing, and have Bruce trying to, tamp him down and then show him the good road. And at the same time, then it's great to then just get Batman by yourself and not have him, go be Batman. So that's what's great about the character. I mean, you can do all these different things with him at any different time, and you can just play with this great roster and go anywhere you want.
Well, and for Pete and Brad, can you guys talk a little bit about why bring Damian back in after Detective 1000?
I don't know when you decided to put Damian in there, because he wasn't in the first issue, but part of me wondered if because we had a conversation about me reading your Batman and Robin run and how much I loved it, and I wondered if you put him in after talking about that.
No, I definitely wanted to bring him in, because I actually do really enjoy that. It just adds a little spice to it, because to write Batman sometimes too lone vigilante, for a while, at least for me, I get a little antsy with it. I like the banter and the backbone that Damian throws back at him. I mean, I grew up with Grayson, and he was my favorite Robin. And until I started writing Damian and peeling him back a bit more after working, seeing what Grant was doing, and even digging deeper and diving deeper into him, he ended up really surprisingly becoming my favorite Robin. He is really the perfect Robin in terms of if you want a Robin who has all those special skills and talents that can justify allowing a 10-year-old out at night.
Well, he's the thing, reading your version of him, that made me realize why he's so special. And I love Grant's version too, but reading your version made me realize that he's sort of Batman without any emotional connection. Like, he's the perfect evolution of Batman, given what Batman wants to be. Even though despite himself, he creates all these emotional attachments. And the great thing about, I think, the way that you write that character, and I couldn't write Damian when I was doing Batman because I had a son that was very at the same age, and it was just hard for me to imagine that son being like punched in the face as I was like, go son, fight Riddler.
And meanwhile, I was exactly opposite. I was like, yeah, let's go. I had a son the same age.
Well, no, your son's older, but my son would have, both our sons would have kicked their ass, like Riddler and all of them. But no, I mean, what I realized reading it was that, it's about Batman's arc. It's about him realizing that he's training somebody to be better than he is in that regard. And that's why I think Damian is the kind of end of Robin's,
Yeah.
He starts off worse than Batman is, and then turns out better than he is.
Well, it's interesting watching Batman try to soften someone instead of harden someone.
Yeah, exactly.
And Damian is like starting on the opposite end of the spectrum from all the other Robins, and I feel like it makes him really unique.
Yeah, I think that's Grant's brilliance with it.
Yeah, and the great thing is you can draw when you have a son at that age too. When I was writing it, my son had there was little bits where I mentioned before, I think in other spots, but he's just a scene in Batman and Robin where Robin picks up Batman's boot and just puts it up against his own and sees the difference in size, the adultness, the the seriousness of it. And then all of a sudden, one day I'm in the garage, and of course, my son just picks up my sneaker, puts it against his sneaker, and then in my head, and because when you're a writer, you just steal every moment of your life and just putting it into other shit. But so I'm like, I got to remember that. That's a cool bit. And then I added it into Batman Robin, and at the table, a lot of conventions, people were like, I love that moment when Robin, just a small silent moment, and Batman is just kind of looking aside as Robin puts the boots together. So it's cool things like that you can draw from real life to even sort of put into these characters and make them even more flesh and blood.
Mm-hmm. And just kind of getting into expanding and talking about other people within the Bat family, I want to talk a little bit about Batgirl. Cecil Castellucci, your comic comes out next week, the first issue of Batgirl.
First one, yeah.
So give us a little bit of what people can expect in the coming months with Batgirl.
Well, I'm coming in on Year of the Villain, so you can expect some villains.
Yeah.
Yeah, some stuff is happening in the DC universe, and so Batgirl. I think what you can see is that she's really going to be challenged and shaken to her core, which is sort of what's happening. And I can't really say too much, but I just do want to speak about Batgirl for a minute because when you talk about Batman and him coming from trauma, with his parents dying and Robin as well, and and Damian and all the Robins. Batgirl, even though she's derivative from Batman, she's very much her own person, and she's very independent, and she's very resilient. She's a very resilient character. She's got a lot of growth in her that she does. She's constantly evolving, and that has to do with like her, her incredible memory and her brawn. But she really is a scrappy, independent person who, yes, came from a fractured family, but did not deal with the same things. And so, what I love about Batgirl is that she's sort of putting the bat symbol on her was sort of an immediate way to sort of be like, okay, you're a vigilante and you can swing through the city and get stuff done. But she very much functions, I think, in her own sort of way. And so I think she's a proud Bat family person, but she doesn't have that same relationship with Batman that the Robins do. And I just love her. And so yeah, I'm excited.
Well, we are excited too, and I think that there might be. I know you said you can't tell us too much, but I think we might be able to see some new stuff. What are we seeing up there?
Oh, well, let's see. Well,
I can see them there.
well, this is wow. This is being sprung on me. I don't know. This is. I mean, I think you can recognize who that might be. That face is a very interesting robot that has come to life. That will challenge our girl to her core. But if you know the history of Batgirl, actually, she existed before the Batman '66, the Batman show, the Adam West show. But they sort of reinvented her for the show because they knew that they needed, a girl in the show. And the Batgirl that we know and love kind of springs from that Yvonne Craig version. And the first villain that she really fights, Batgirl, in her origin is Killer Moth, and so that's who you saw in the other thing. And so I don't want to spoil too much about it. I'll just say that I think you recognize who that is, and I think you understand why maybe she's going to have some. It's a bad villain.
I love it. The thing that's so fun about
really
these
cool.
panels so many times is that we get to show artwork up here of new versions of characters or bringing character into someone's story. What is it like for each of you, whoever wants to jump in, really feeling that and seeing that moment with the fans in the audience and be like, hey, this is the version that I want to portray and put out there?
Oh, sorry. Did you ask us? Sorry, I was like, I wasn't
all
expecting
nerding
that.
out
I was like
about
processing.
We were scolding the spoilers happening.
Just kind of talking about what it's like revealing or showing the versions of the character that fans here are seeing for the first time, and really embracing that you might be taking a character in a new direction, or you might be introducing a character that people might be surprised to see.
Yeah, well, I think it's super thrilling. I mean, these guys have been writing mainstream in continuity comics longer than I have. This is my first time. I've done a lot of outside of continuity stuff, and so that's what's really exciting, to really feel like you are writing something that's sort of affecting the universe. And what I think is really cool and maybe hard sometimes is how things that happen in other Bat books affect what happens to my character as well, and vice versa, in a smaller, big way. And that's really thrilling because as storytelling, as hard as a shared universe is, you definitely feel like as a group we're all sort of contributing together to this sort of tapestry of storytelling.
Yeah, well, I think that's the great thing too about comics, and it was a really impactful storyline for me. How many people in here read Court of Owls?
That's all?
But that's something where you're talking about, really doing something and changing the makeup of what the Bat world is and adding something in there that is so iconic now and so cool, which I love so much. But for Scott and Greg, do you guys want to kind of just jump in on that a little bit? What's that like for you, knowing that, you create something and it does really have a ripple effect?
Well, I mentioned Scott earlier today in a couple different times. One person was like, you've taken on this character, so much has been done with it. Isn't it impossible to do anything, new and fresh? And I go, obviously this guy didn't read any of our work, because I think Scott was brilliant when he created Court of Owls. And I'll tell you, Batman is very overconfident that nobody knows Gotham better than he does, right? He's arrogant to a fault, Scott proved, by introducing the court, which has been there underneath his nose and been there for 400 years. And I go, that's how you do it. Beyond. No, I didn't say that. But I said, I give the credit to Scott. I drew the story, but he conceived that, and I'm not saying it because my friend, I'm puffing him up. I think that was brilliant. And so I go, it can always be done. Not better than Scott has done it probably for a very long time, right, Scott? Now I'm kissing him up because he's my buddy. But anyway, and I said it again in an interview. And so I'm very proud to be involved with the Court of Owls and to be a collaborator with Scott, because I think that was a genius idea, and he's got just a whole bag of ideas that I think are just great. So. Yeah.
Well, I think the thing about Batman that makes him so enduring is that he's a really simple concept. It's that you take the things that are traumatic to you and you turn them into fuel to make you win, and that's it. That's the basic bottom line of Batman that makes him everlasting. He's a folktale in that way. And the thing that's great is that you might not love every version of Batman. You might not, relate to, or you relate, but you might not, completely get every take on him. Like whether it's Grant or me or Tom or, Denny or anybody, or Frank. But that core thing is so simple that it's adaptable to so many different interpretations. And the thing that I love about being able to do our last story with, Last Night on Earth is that it comes full circle. We began with a story that was very much about a group of villains, the Court of Owls, that said the people don't know best. And at the end, with Last Night, we're dealing with a future in which everybody has decided that the villains are their real shepherds and the heroes are no longer needed. And so it is one kind of conversation with the idea of Batman. What makes us overcome the things that make us afraid, make us feel that we're less than we are, and triumph. How do we turn those things that make us terrified into fuel? And so I love this book. I'm really proud of it. The second book has everything from like Lex Luthor 20 years in the future, where he's conquered Brainiac and he's bringing Superman rockets here right and left, and he's trying to sort of revive Superman, and it has the underworld with the Spectre's cloak and everybody that's died in the DCU. It's got like, I don't want to spoil too much. I feel like I already did, but it's like it's sort of the entire DCU seen through the lens of what Batman means, And to me, as much as we all criticize or sort of get on DC sometimes for putting Batman forward in front of Superman or Wonder Woman, and I love those characters equally, and I think they're equally powerful and important. The thing that I think makes Batman so immediately relatable is that he's a human story. He says, he doesn't have powers, he's not a god, he's not an alien. He's a person who had something terrible happen and said, I'm going to use this as protein to be stronger, and that's it. And so this story is very much a kind of full circle on everything Greg and I have done on the entire sort of mythos of Batman. And I think it's the best thing. I really do believe it's the best thing we've done, and I'm really, really proud of it. And I'm so grateful to you guys, like the fact that you sold it out and made it, do as well as it has done, and all of that. Like, you guys have been with us. You're the best fans in the world. We've had you for 10 years. Thank you so much. You've seen like him through, all kinds of stuff. You've seen me through a new kid and like all kinds of shit. Like, we really appreciate it. So thank you again. This one, I promise, like we're giving it everything we have.
I think the awesome thing too, when you get new stories or new ideas and take Batman maybe in different directions, you always get new visuals and things. And I have to ask, what is going on with the Joker head in the lantern? I was like very Haunted Mansion vibes for me. But talk to us a little bit about that. What can you reveal or share?
I'll leave it to Scott, but I'll just say that was like one part of the pitch when he sold me on. He goes, and Joker's head, severed head, it'd be in a jar, but he talks, it's alive, and I'm right there, and I was sold. I'm really a cheap date.
He is. He is. I swear.
Metal, and he's going, and there'll be a Joker dragon and battle axes, Batman on battle axes, and I'm a cheap date. I'm going, you don't have to buy me any more drinks. I'm in.
It wasn't even that. I invited him to my house, and I bought his favorite tequila, and I was going to pitch him Metal, and all I got to was the title is Metal, and he was like, "I'm in." And I had like a fucking whiteboard and like a whole thing that I was going to pitch him. He was like, "I'm done."
I just got to say, what kind of coincidence is that? Right, our last Batman story is taking place on Black Label.
Right, I know, but no, the Joker head in a jar. Joker has been a part of every story that we've done. Batman, to me, our version of him, and Grant told me this when I started and I was freaking out about being on Batman. He said, you have to create a birth and a death for him. And you have to have some kind of core that Batman's about and that Joker's about. And so for me, Batman is about taking something like a meaningless act. His parents were killed over nothing, over pearls, over garbage. And, that should teach you that life has no meaning. And instead, every action that he performs, he says, has meaning. He says, my life is an engine of meaning. And Joker, in retaliation, says, the way you win is to realize that nothing you do has meaning. Everything's meaningless. So we've kind of gone back and forth with that Greek chorus of Joker and Batman throughout our whole tenure on Batman or whatever Batman story we've done. This one is really about Joker finally being confused about whether he was right or not and being almost a Greek chorus cheering Batman on in the face of this new terror that's bigger than anything he's fought before. So, I think it makes a really good end cap. And again, I think the beauty of all of it is that right now I'm so proud to have it coming out in a time where Batman is so variable, where I think what Pete is doing with Detective, the Spectre, Arkham Knight has been so fantastic. What Brian Azzarello is doing with The Damned, and obviously what Tom has been doing with City of Bane and what's coming up is fantastic. All of that stuff, like the fact that Batman is so variable and yet so potent in all these different forms and always says to you, get up, you can win, take the thing that makes you afraid and use it to make you brave, is just a testament to how great the character is 80 years in. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, and it's a testament to you guys for supporting it for so long. So thank you again.
True. I love doing these panels because I love seeing the camaraderie between all of you guys and on each book, whether it's writer and artist, the bond that you guys have or talking with each other when you're writing Bat books around the same time. It's really, really cool to see because I think that's something that a lot of, fans reading are like, we want to see what the relationships are. It's awesome getting to see everybody supporting each other and, lifting each other up and offering advice or just being like, that was awesome. Like, I love that. So Scott mentioned a little bit about what you guys are working on over here, Tom and Mitch. I think we have some slides of that kind of stuff. If you guys want to jump into talking about City of Bane.
I should apologize. Mitch and I are like super tight right now because the Eisners are tonight, and we're up for some awards. And
wait, you're tired before going to the event?
They're like in 2 hours we find out whether we're going to be super sad or super happy for the rest of the night. Not that we care. It's an honor to be nominated.
Oh, we care so much.
We care so much. Even Batman, thanks to you and your support of this wonderful book, even Batman's nominated. So I'd find out if Batman wins the Eisner. So I apologize for the nervousness. Yes, this just came out. People who have been following it know that for since issue 50, where this wedding happened and everything went so well. I know some of you read it then.
Makes you want to.
I've been tearing down Batman for 25 issues, and since that's a whole year of getting Batman to the core of him, And I remember putting this up on the board and being like, I'm going to do 25 issues of Batman Falling. And I think Bendis came up to me and said, Tom, that's going to be really hard. I was like, no, it'll be super easy. And I was so fucking wrong. It's been hard. It's been tough to see Batman down, and now we're finally at that point in Batman 75 where he's Wolverine in the basement, saying it's my turn. He's Daredevil after the apartment building blowing up. He shouldn't have signed it. You know, this is his John Wick. The puppy died. Like now we're finally to that moment where Batman's like, I see who my enemy is. I see it clearly. I see what's going on, and now I'm gonna come back and kick some ass. And I'm just excited to write some kick-ass comics after 25. So yeah, that's what City of Bane is, and it's drawn by Tony Daniel, and in the first issue by Mitch Gerads, and Mikel Janin is coming in, and John Romita Jr. is coming in, and it's the culmination of 5 years, or 4 or 5 years of work. So thanks for checking it out. I appreciate it.
Well, and from going from that place, why Bane?
Well, I thought Bane was, this is Andy Corey, an editor at DC Comics, came up to me when I was sort of brainstorming the first issues, and he goes, how about Bane? And I was like, oh, Bane's stupid. He's the background character in the worst Batman movie. Both iterations, the worst Batman movie,
And
right?
you said all of this in Chom's Bane voice.
Yeah, you know, yeah. And he's like, no, do you know Bane's origin? I was like, yeah, born in a prison, whatever. He's like, no, his real origin. He was 4 years old, and his parents were taken from him, and he was locked in a cell to die because the cell flooded every night. And so they expected him to die that first night, and what he did was he would float to the top, and he would tread water for 9 hours, and he would eat because fish would come by, and he'd bite them. And then the water would go down, and he lived like that for 17 years until they let him out. So from the ages of 4 to 21. And I was like, oh my God, that's the coolest origin story anyone's ever had. I was like, and I was like, oh, his superpower is willpower. That's his superpower. Like, he will not die. He will not stop. He's the immovable object. And I'm dealing with Batman, and that's his superpower. And then you're like, oh, okay, now I see what now you're in Superman 2, where you have Zod versus Clark. You know, you're in that point where you have two immovable objects are going at each other, and that's why Bane.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is something that stands out so much with Batman and the Batworld to me, and growing up with the character, where it's the villains, the people that go up against Batman are something that just defines him so much. Do you guys, if we can just run down the line, your favorite Bat villain, or if you want to go over like the craziest Bat villain for each of you guys from reading it or seeing it on a show or whatever your connection is with that? Mine would definitely, it has to always be, and I know it's a flip-flop because I think a lot of people say The Killing Joke, but I loved Pain and Prejudice. I loved reading about Penguin's story, and so for me, that is a really iconic Bat villain story for me.
My favorite villain? I really love Kite Man, guys. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Hell yeah.
I love writing him.
Don't apologize.
He's in the next issue, and yeah, because he's Charlie Brown, man. He's the opposite. He never gets to kick that football, and I think that would create the worst villain in the world. Yeah, Kite Man. Hell yeah.
Historically, mine's always been the Riddler. There's this beautiful idea I've always had in my head that I tell Tom he needs to write, but like it's a thing he'd have to like go to a cabin for a few years and figure out.
I think you're just trying to get me to a cabin for a few years.
But just like the smartest like Riddler story you've ever read, where like as you uncover clues, the reader is like, holy shit, you combine this to this and this. But lately my answer has changed to Professor Pig. It's terrifying. And then like give terrifying ideas to Tom King, and then they become a new thing that keeps you up, and yeah.
I feel like to get him to the cabin, you need to get the tequila that Scott used.
It's all gone.
And then you might get your Riddler story.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna do a Batgirl villain, which is the new villain that's coming up, because Batgirl, her whole rogues gallery is mostly Batman ones, and so I'm really excited about her, you know, sort of getting her own. So yeah, next week.
I like a lot of times when he fights, I like the creature type villains a lot, and I think it works in response to what a human character he is. There's something fun about seeing him against something so inhuman, and it's almost like the fun is watching him get written out of a corner to something that a human being couldn't possibly comprehend, much less face. But even saying that, I feel like so many of his villains are twisted in a way that they work in the same capacity. Somebody like Joker, or even the brilliance of somebody like Riddler, it still works in the same capacity of, like, you know, a human facing something so vastly beyond themselves. But Man-Bat and Clayface, guys like that, I eat up.
It's funny, sometimes it seems like a pat answer, but a lot of times, whatever I'm writing, like, be it now I'm working on the Freeze stuff for the villain stuff, and I'm really getting into Mr. Freeze a lot. I did a lot of work with Bane in Arkham War and a bunch of other stuff, and I ended up really getting into Bane. And then, of course, when Scott and Greg did The Death of the Family, and I got a chance to do Joker in those 2 issues with Robin, and that voice in my head has always kind of stuck, and it was a blast to write the Joker. And I just did 1008, thank you, is a one shot with Doug Mahnke drawing the Joker, and this really cool bit where we go back to the park, to the amusement park, where we know what happened. So yeah, it seems to be a lot of times you get into the gear that I always try to really find that the villain I'm working on, I really like to immerse myself in it, and becomes my favorite at that time, who I never would have imagined would have bumped up the list really quickly. So and Two-Face also had a blast working with Two-Face in a big 5-part arc back on Batman and Robin. So the one it's almost like the kid that's in the car with you sometimes is the one. The one
I was going to say, you're like, I'm not going to pick a favorite. I'm just going to, if I just sit up here, I'd be like, well, this time it was this kid, this villain, this time it might have been this one.
Yep.
But you have to fall in love with what you're working on
Yeah,
a little
absolutely.
bit. So it naturally has to be your absolute favorite.
Yeah, it
So
does.
I
It does
agree.
tend to work that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about Batman's Rogues Gallery is that, to me, it's the only one where every villain is sort of a clear psychological extension of him. You know, where Two-Face is the duality of his life, Joker is the fear that nothing matters, you know, all of it. Like, the Penguin is sort of a play on the fact that he's like a rich boy playing hero. All of it is so potent, you know, that it's almost a template for how to write a good villain if you're not writing Batman. That everybody is so fun to write. For me, it's I guess I'm torn because I love writing new villains like Court of Owls or Batman Who Laughs, who I'm like immersed with right now, and he's sort of more evil than the Joker, so he's a lot of fun for me to write, especially with like a new baby and everything, where I'm like, I'm up at 2 a.m, I'm gonna be mean. And then also the classic villains, Joker has always been my favorite because regardless of whether you sort of are looking at my version of Batman, our version of Batman, Tom's version of Batman, Grant's version of Batman, Joker is always sort of the polar opposite in some way, where he approaches and says, whatever you are at this moment, I'm your opposite. So he's always my favorite out of the classics for that reason, and that's why he's been such a staple of our stuff.
With me, he's got all the best villains. Batman has all the best villains, so I love them all. But from a visual perspective, you know, what's fun to draw enters into the mix, right? And I like big characters, so he's finally given me a chance to draw Bane. Finally, it's only taken 10 years, and you know, so you know, I've had bits with Scarecrow and Penguin, which Penguin's a blast to draw, you know. But the one where I always, you know, was going, why is he so stingy? How much Catwoman have you ever given me to draw? I think I got like a cameo panel once, right? That's about it. It's like all testosterone-fueled Batman villains. I'm like, right? So I'm going, I would love to have done Catwoman, you know, just because there's a whole different component to going from the female angle. But yeah, I loved, if you've seen last night, Bane, he's got the top of his head chopped off, so he's like
Lobotomized.
Yeah. So he's got a flat top. And Scarecrow has no no lower body, and his hands are like long needles. He walks around like a spider. His head's like in a plastic bag. You know what I mean? It's just like, so he gives me all this great, creepy, cool stuff. So I'm scratching 2 itches with that. I got the big character, and I got the creep factor with the Scarecrow. But at some point, I mean, we got to come back.
Catwoman is in book 3.
Okay, finally.
She really is.
For more than one panel.
I promise.
Everyone in this room heard it, so.
It's already, I finished it. It's done. She's in there.
Awesome.
I love it because I feel like, again, 80th anniversary, and there are so many villains in the Rogues Gallery you can choose from, and Batman has impacted all of our lives so much, all of your guys' lives. That's why you're here at Comic-Con at this panel right now. So first, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you guys for coming out to listen to them talk about some of these iconic books and stories that they're telling that are going to be eventually people's iconic moments with Batman and the Bat family, which I think is so cool. And thanks to our panelists for coming out today. Thanks, you guys. Give them such a huge round of applause. And I think we might have a little video for you guys here at the end, but while we just say one more big thank you. Thank you guys again all so much for coming out, and happy 80th anniversary for Batman! Did I make that up? Maybe I did. I think I did. Clark?
The suspense.
I fully made it up. All right, you guys. So it was
awesome.
It started with me being like, Greg, he's late getting his cowl on, and I ended it with, there's no video. So thank you guys again so much for coming out. Have a great rest of your Comic-Con.
Thank you, guys.